Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Covered and the Law. I'm your host, Samson Ladi Anyanini. And this afternoon, the president may have eased some of the restrictions. But why are some of us behaving as though he declared that COVID-19 is over in Ghana? You join us today as myself, together with my guest, we remind you of the new measures for our protection and to also learn about the consequences of non-compliance. Let's learn about a good example of spot fines in the Volta region. They have done something quite new. If you don't wear your mask, you are in trouble. We'll be right back to bring you the discussion on the new restrictions, what you must know. This is Covered and the Law, your legal light and help law in these trying times. Government is gradually relaxing restrictions to enable all to come to a new normal despite a rise in COVID-19 cases. Ghana's case count is now over 11,000 with 51 deaths. In easing the restrictions last week, some organizations and institutions were permitted to somehow start some level of activity. Others will start this week. Here is our news round.
Beginning Monday, final year university students will start campus learning, to be followed later by final year senior high school and junior high school students. At a meeting with the president at the Jubilee House, chairman of Vice Chancellors Ghana, Professor Ebenezer Odro, who is also the Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana, said the universities have no intention of defying the president's orders, but indicated that in the absence of personal protective equipment, it will be difficult to encourage lecturers and students to meet.
We believe that the orders was given within a certain context, and that tells us that we need also to apply wisdom and some level of discretion in getting the students to campus to complete. Education
Minister Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempeh said government will provide adequate PPEs this weekend to both lecturers and students. He wants the schools to strictly enforce the protocols on social distancing and the wearing of face masks.
The face masks that government has also promised a set of 3 to all students, teaching and teaching staff, that the Ministry of Trade is organizing to the government setup. For the lesser institutions, the vermiculite bucket, the sanitizers, the soaps, government will try to supply them as much as possible to ensure that the hygienic protocols and the social distancing are all met within government means as quickly as possible.
The University of Ghana has taken the lead to show that they are prepared ahead of Monday to receive students back onto campus.
If they go to the hall of residence, they are supposed to come along with face masks. Each student is supposed to carry face mask. Minimum of 3, those that can be reused. They are supposed to carry their own sanitizers. But at the entrance and strategic positions or points of the hall, there are vermiculite buckets, soap, and tissues for them to use.
Meanwhile, government has distributed 110 million Ghana cedis worth of PPEs, face masks and other materials to over 200 tertiary institutions.
The president set up a committee to coordinate this under the leadership of the senior minister, and so he's also been here this morning checking and ensuring that the distribution is going on accordingly. Okay. The data we have is supposed to cover all tertiary institutions. Okay. And then in addition to the data that we have, we've also made an allowance for some more, assuming there are some contingencies behind. So we expect to cover all tertiary institutions, final year students who are going back to school from next year.
The local government ministry donated over 7,000 Veronica bucket sets to churches and mosques to keep the virus at bay, but most mosques refuse to congregate.
In our bit, but as a matter of fact, we need to be clear on this matter that the restrictions that the president has communicated to the nation will not be easy to apply in any mosque or any place where religious gatherings are held, because the numbers that he mentioned in the statement are not going to be easy to ensure in any such places of worship.
We end with a church that is ensuring the social distancing protocols.
How many of you have sat in a taxi? Okay. How many of you have sat in a trotro? Okay. Listen to me. I want to tell you something. Because sometimes the enemy will sow something in our ears. Because the Bible says that the devil comes as an angel of light. All these places that I've mentioned, including here, which is more safer place to go? Which is more safer place to go? Church. But why is it that the devil has put in the minds of people that the church is not a safer place? As if when you come, ya chichi virus na wahana oba pepa ni ama baako.
You're welcome back. And Pastor Ransford Obin's conclusion there got me laughing, and I couldn't help but bring it on the set as well. Once again, you're here on COVID and the Law. This is your legal light and help law in these trying times. As we have already made it known to you, is there something you must know in the new regulations, so to speak? It's called the EI, Executive Instruments, as issued by His Excellency the President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo after his very final last speech about easing the restrictions. Have you paid attention? Is there something in there that you may get yourself into trouble and may get into jail because you have not paid attention? This afternoon, myself and two of my friends are taking the time to assist you to understand the details of the law as partly communicated by the President at a time that it was not law. My guests are Andrews Doji Adugu. He's a state attorney at the Attorney General's Department in the Volta region. Andrews, thank you very much for joining us. Andrews, I can hear you okay. So Andrews tried to fix his mic so he can hear us very clearly. But here in the studio is Mrs. Roslyn Kalaji, who is a colleague of mine practicing from the same law firm, A Partners at Law. Roslyn, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great, great, great. So we'll start from this note. The news round that we just saw, you saw people who are beginning to take things for granted. And in the course of the week, you follow JoyNews and you discover that they went into a market And it does appear people feel as though the easing of the restrictions means as if, you know, the president made a declaration that COVID-19 is over.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's how a lot of people are seeing it. In fact, from the beginning, they don't even think it exists.
Yeah, there are some who think that way.
Because some have not had a brush with it. They've not experienced it. I have personally had, you know, people close to me who have actually suffered and even passed on to blessed memory because of this COVID-19. So it's just a lot of education that has to be done.
I know one or two people who have tested positive, and the feeling is threatening. It's very threatening.
That's right. That's right.
I think this week you may also have discovered that may have been the reason that the burial of some of the people, the media was giving access. So you would have seen that JoyNews went to cover the burial of some of the people.
Just so as to sensitize the rest of the citizens that this thing is real, even though they are taking
You think that can make any impact?
I believe
letting them see that people are dying and they're getting buried?
I believe so. It's unfortunate that we have to pry into, you know, if I should call it the private affairs of, you know, some families, but unless that is done, me and my Ghanaian folk, maybe we have to see to believe. So, yeah.
Andrews, I don't know what you think about how people seem to be taking COVID, even at the time when over 11,000 people have tested positive. How do you see people's, you know, reaction and their conduct as far as, you know, complying with the measures is concerned in the Volta region?
Well, something. Thank you, and good afternoon to your listeners. The thing about it is that people generally, of the figures we are having and the numbers are going high, we need to step up our efforts in respect of compliance.
All right. Okay. So Andrew is having a bit of a difficulty with his connection. I suppose it's the internet, but we'll try and get a clearer, better connection so we can all be held. Now, let's begin from this note. Is it from tomorrow, a section of students are supposed to be returning to school?
That's right.
There are some people who are very uncomfortable about that. There are some who preach that we are getting into the new normal. So people might just, you know, get used to the fact that this is what we are getting into. But there are some who just can't, you know, wrap their head around it, that they will have to go back to school. Let's begin with the basis of the law by way of the EI that provides for people to go back to school. And when they are going back to school, what should happen? What should the school administrators do, among other things? What does the law say?
Very well. So for educational institutions, they are captured under the EI 134, and what they have to do is spelled out very clearly. I mean, the black and white of the law. It's not too complicated. Basically, from my understanding, because of the manner in which it's drafted, it uses a more permissive language and then goes on to, you know, mandate the education ministry and the heads of private institutions to undertake certain key things.
All right.
So, with regards to tertiary institutions, the law says that these schools may, it says they may open and operate to accommodate final year students from 15th of June. And for secondary schools or senior high schools, they may also return from the 22nd of June.
Right.
Then you go to the gold track students who are in their second year of senior SHS. They may also return on the 22nd of June. Final year students in JHS may also return on 29th of June. Right. And I'm stressing the May because...
I discovered you were stressing
yes,
May. Why? Why the stress?
Because the law has used a permissive language.
Okay.
So you can choose. If you are scared, don't go to school. If you are not scared, you can go.
Do you suggest by that, when it says, let me get to it, it says that all educational institutions, that's paragraph 2 of the EI 136 or 34? 134. It says all educational institutions, including universities, other tertiary institutions, training institutions, senior high schools, junior high schools, primary schools, kindergarten, nurseries, crèche, and Sunday schools in churches are closed.
Yes.
Notwithstanding what it has already said, universities, other tertiary or training institutions, senior high schools, and junior high schools may open. So, may open. So, does it mean that the discretion is left to the administrators, heads of the institutions?
Yes, I believe so. Because, I mean, we are in trying times.
Right.
No one knows what will happen by the opening of the schools. We've read of, you know, from other jurisdictions where I believe it's South Korea also, and they have been doing a very good job so far. They opened the schools, and then some way, somehow, there was another spike, and they had to shut down about 200 of the schools. So they leave it to you. But you see, the law doesn't stop there. It says you may open, and then it goes on to now give you a job that you have to do.
Tell us
if
about
you want
the job.
if you want to open, then the Ministry of Education and the heads of public and private institutions shall, prior to the return of these specified students, so from SHS, university, JHS, they are supposed to fumigate and disinfect their respective institutions. So my understanding is Ministry of Education will make sure that the public schools are fumigated and disinfected, and then the heads of the private schools also have the mandate. They must make sure that this is done before the students return.
Okay, so once again, I'm noticing something you are doing.
Yes.
You began by stressing on may open.
Yes.
And then when it comes to the things that the heads of the public and private institutions should do before they open,
yes,
the law uses shall.
Yes.
So the first one you said is a permissive language.
That is so.
But this is what?
This one is mandatory.
Mandatory.
Yes.
Okay.
So
compulsory.
It's compulsory. You cannot open.
Once you decide that you are opening,
exactly,
you must do this.
Have to do this. Yes.
If you don't do this,
then you are
breaking the law.
Breaking the law, and all sanctions.
Let's take a break, and then when we return, I'll remind you of what the sanctions are. You're welcome back. This is Covered and the Law, your legal light and help law in these trying times. And our guest here, Mrs. Rosalind Kalaji, this is her very first appearance on television, and I was surprised by how she was making her delivery. So I was commending her a while ago about that. Let's go to Andrew Adugu. Andrew, thank you very much. I hope you are clear now and you can hear us.
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. So first, your comments about your observations in the Volta region and how people are complying with the preventative measures.
Well, I think generally people have been relaxed, and they are not really understanding what's the effect of COVID-19 and how real it is. We need to step up our efforts in especially use of face masks. What I've observed is that for the hand washing, a lot of people are doing it. Private institutions, malls, all other places, they are observing it. But the public transport would have the mask in the car, but will not put it on. except you prompt them. So that's what I see. People are generally relaxed, and we need to step up our efforts.
Right. And shortly we'll be talking about wearing of the mask, and I have got my box of masks here. I keep it in my car, so anytime I need, I just pick one, and then I have my sanitizer. I just sanitize and do it. So when we get there, I want us to take the opportunity, for those of you who may not have taken your time to learn how to wear the mask and to remove it, we'll try and demonstrate that to you. Myself and Rosalind, she also has hers, and she's keeping it until we get to that point. Now, you will be telling us also a certain, very nice way, effective way, that the Volta region may be the region that is showing the way in this country as to how to ensure the best form of compliance. Maybe let's talk about that briefly before we come to the measures generally. You, working in the Attorney General's Department, of course, will have to make yourself available to advise various institutions of states around, the region. What is the region doing about the mask that we hear about, spot fines? How exactly is it doing it?
Okay, so the RECSEC issued just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, issued a directive to all assemblies to enforce the wearing of nose masks. And the whole municipal assembly took a very bold step to issue a directive saying that those who do not wear face masks would be subjected to a spot fine of 20 cedis payment. Now, this information was released by the municipal information officer. Now, my checks with him indicates that the whole municipal assembly has what we call the fee fixing regulations under the bylaws of the assembly. So although there's no specific bylaw which says that if you do not wear a face mask, you are going to be punished, they have gone under the provisions, under the fee fixing regulations, under the bylaws. And one of the provisions is if you fail to abide by a governmental health or environmental regulation. And that one, there's a first warning. If you fail to comply, you pay 150 cedis. The second warning, if you fail to comply, you pay about 250 cedis. And the last warning, if you do not comply, you pay about 500 cedis.
Okay.
But the Public Health Emergency Management Committee of the Assembly felt that, well, they wouldn't want to exact too much pain on the residents of the whole municipal assembly. So instead of going by that schedule, fee-fixing schedule, they are rather saying that 20 cedis. And now this is the interesting aspect of it. When the task force meets you, that's the no entry, no face mask, no entry task force, when they meet you, what they require you to do is that when you pay the spot fine, they have masks that have been designed according to the specific regulations, which will be given to you.
Okay.
So if you pay the spot fine, you are given the mask just to wear on the spot.
Okay.
And these, they have spoken to various seamstresses to do this particular thing. So as and when they pick them and they give it to you, so not only enforcement, but they are ensuring that once we meet you and you are not in the mask, you don't just pay the spot fine and go away.
Right.
We give you the mask and your advice. And I understand that they are doing this with a lot of tact, and they have done a lot of even education before going ahead to do this.
Great. So this is a district assembly or municipal assembly that has discovered a provision of the law that it can use, and is appropriating it correctly to use to compel people to do the things that will be for their own protection. Because as we discover, people are not actually doing what they have to do. And when they hear of a potential sanction, then they begin to sit up.
Yes.
As the local assemblies law allows the district assemblies to make bylaws, and in those bylaws they can exact a punishment of an amount not more than 2,400, and then they can exact prison terms of not more than 6 months. So what they are doing is way below it, and they are using their own this thing. So now let's get to...
It's brilliant.
Let's get to where we were. And you were talking about the things that heads of public and private institutions
yes.
must do,
yes.
compulsory,
yes.
prior to the return of the students.
Yes.
And these are to do what?
They are to make sure that they disinfect the premises and fumigate.
All right.
And then when we go on further, you would see that they are required to provide hand wash basins with running water and soap, sanitizers, etc. So just basically the protocols that we have been using so far, in addition to fumigating and disinfecting the premises before the students
So first of all, the number of students has to be reduced.
Yes.
So for the universities, it has to be what number?
The law caters for that. So for the universities, you are expected to do half of the class.
Half of the class.
Yes.
So it is the universities that are returning tomorrow.
Yes.
Final year students returning tomorrow. You must have only half of the class in one class.
Yes.
That means they must find other facilities within the university to accommodate another group.
That's right.
All right. So every class will be divided into two.
Yes.
And they must find 2 places for them to use. Now, apart from that, then they must do social distancing.
Yes, 1 meter.
1
spacing
meter
for all the students.
Okay.
They must also ensure, and then here too, the Ministry of Education will supply reusable masks.
Right. But the first social distancing for the students, for the teaching, non-teaching staff, and the students as well. All staff.
Yes, everyone in the
There must be social distancing.
Yes.
And then, after observing social distancing, what should they do again?
They must follow, the enhanced hygiene protocols, like I've already said, washing of their hands with soap and running water, alcohol-based hand sanitizers, and then also, this is why I said that the law mandates, the Ministry of Education to provide reusable masks.
Right.
Yes.
The last time I hosted the deputy director at the education service, I think he said each person will be giving about 3 or so at a certain time, so it can be reused. That certainly is good to note. Andrew, what does your reading of the EI tell you about the practicality of what has to be done for students to return in safety?
So for me, the basic point about it is that, first of all, just as my colleague Mrs. Kaleji has said, you would have to fumigate and disinfect the place. That is 1. 2, you would have to ensure that even when they come to the class, for senior high school, it's 25 per class. And for junior high school, it's 35 per class. Now, when you even bring them to the school or they are in the school, they all have to be in nose mask.
Right.
That is provided by the law, that they all have to be in nose mask. Then there's also the requirement that social distancing between the pupils or the students. And teaching and non-teaching staff. So the focus has probably been, only teaching staff. But we're also talking about non-teaching staff. And even among the teachers, there should be social distancing.
Right.
And among the non-teaching staff, there should be social distancing. So for example, people in the kitchen, who, if it's in a secondary school, those who are going to be in the kitchen or dining halls providing food for them, you have to make sure that there's social distancing.
Right.
In the staff common room, if there's one, they have to be social distancing.
All right.
And so, you would realize that some protocols have even been given after these regulations. The Ministry of Education says there's not going to be any religious activity, people may not visit, and there are certain restrictions. So in all of this, there's this social distance and requirement.
So in the schools, there will not be gatherings in the schools. There will not be assemblies. There will not be, as you like, breaks, so to speak. Now, the universities, the final year students, they are supposed to be half of the class. For the senior high, like you said, 25. Right. 25 in the class. And for the junior high, they are supposed to be 30 in the class. Then you spoke about staff, non-teaching staff, and everybody else observing social distancing on all the hygiene protocols. If they don't, you are the ones who do the prosecution. If they don't, these are state institutions trying to help, you know, children to go to school or students to be in school. Will they be punished? Will the heads of institutions, for example, be liable to the criminal sanctions under this regime if they don't fumigate, they don't disinfect and ensure all of these things?
Well, the law says that the ministers in charge or the various agencies which are in charge of such institutions can seek the assistance of the police to ensure that there's compliance with this. That's the first point.
Right.
Now, assuming they do not comply, the EI says that subject to the provisions of Section 6 of the Imposition of Restrictions Act, the particular institution or facility need to be closed down, and the sanctions applied to them. Okay. So, if the institution does not, the institution may be closed down. We are using the word may be closed because they may assess the situation before even go ahead to close. And sanctions be applied to them. And obviously the sanctions are what is provided in the law.
Right.
And these sanctions may be probably criminal sanctions or administrative sanctions under the requirement of the regulations, because if you do not comply with your ministry's directive, then there's an administrative sanction to be given to you. Right. A demotion, disciplinary action, or something of the sort could be fixed on you as a head of institution.
Thank you. But first of all, Rosalind, like Adugu says, you face having your institution shut down. Yes. Particularly if it's a private one, you feel the pinch a lot more. And beyond that, the sanctions may be applied. And the sanctions that are provided simply is that you have to pay a fine. If you're found guilty, you pay a fine starting from 12,000 Ghana cedis and a maximum of 60,000 Ghana cedis. Or in addition to that, you could go to jail for 4 years minimum and to 10 years maximum.
Yes.
So if you can't ensure there's fumigation and you simply don't open.
So for me, that's what I would advise my clients. If you can't do these things, just hold on. Because it says you may open by this date, but it doesn't say you should open by that date. So if you cannot get your facility fumigated by, say, the 15th, you don't need to open. Maybe you can get to do it by the 22nd. Then fine, you can go ahead and open by then. But don't go ahead if you know you're not ready, because then guess what? Look at the steep fines and then even the jail term. I don't think anyone would want to go through that.
Right.
Now.
So beyond the schools, so the social distancing too, you and Adugu must help us. How is anybody going to monitor to be able to come to the conclusion that you are not observing social distancing and therefore you may be punished?
Yes, so there's supposed to be a task force. Even the Ministry of Education will have their people going around to make sure that these things are followed. Now, the question even then becomes the 1 meter. Who is measuring it? You know, in the classroom, how certain are we that between you and myself, it is exactly one meter? So for us as citizens and even institutions, heads of institutions, we must help ourselves. The responsibility is not only on government to say, do this, and so you are going to try. Do it to your best capability. So we just have to also, as citizens, make sure that we are helping the government to help us.
So when you're arranging the classroom, for example, you make sure you can assure...
The measurements must be done, yes, before the students come in. So you space it out. I think in the news round, we saw the church.
Yes,
and how they had
CCC.
spread. Yes.
Calvary Charismatic Church.
I haven't seen that yet. I mean, that was amazing.
Calvary Charismatic Center.
Yes, so I believe the schools can just emulate that.
Right. Okay. And as we know, maybe let's now move from the schools, the religious organizations, and also go beyond that, so that people who are watching and listening can tell what they can do or cannot do. Because initially weddings were banned, you know, sort of. It was only private burials that were allowed with 25 people.
Right.
But now you can do some gathering, wedding, among other things. What is supposed to happen?
Okay, I mean, before I even go to that point, I had somewhat of a challenge with the fact that the law says now weddings are permitted. Because in Ghana, we have various types of marriages. Why didn't the law speak about marriage? So if I'm not going to do a white wedding in church, then I'm stuck because I'm doing maybe a customary marriage or a Mohammedan type marriage.
We will take it that it satisfies all forms of marriages.
Very well.
Yeah.
Yes. So for your marriages or weddings and other things, the law is that you have a limit of up to 100 people. Now, it's also subject to them complying with the social distancing rules. And then interestingly here, you have to keep a register so that there can be contact tracing, where they find that maybe anyone was exhibiting symptoms, it is easier for them to trace who and who that person has been in contact with. So you are spacing 1 meter apart at your wedding program. You are supposed to ensure that there is hand washing basin with running water and soap. You have to make sure that, I mean, you observe all protocols. So it's everything is changing. It's not like how we used to know a wedding party to be. Yes, you have to make sure that you space out. So
if the gathering has one person extra, more than the 100 people, I have breached the law.
You have.
Oh, but why?
You have, because the law says 100. You cannot, if you can't obey the law 99.9%.
Okay.
You have to obey it 100%. So if it says 100 people, you can't have 101. You have to make sure it's 100.
Adugu, you are the prosecutor. She is the defense attorney. So just one person extra, I have faulted.
Yes. Well, the law is the law. And when the law says 100, it's 100. And we are doing all this, and there's a reason behind why the law said 100 and not said about 100 or just around 100. And one of the things we need to understand is that the managers of facilities where these events are held, or those who have control over such places, bear a singular responsibility for the numbers who would come over there. So if the numbers are more than 100, if one person even is more, you know that you are in trouble. The whole idea is that when you give too much laxity, people tend to abuse it. It doesn't even say you must have 100 people, it says maximum. So if you know that you want to be very careful, then obviously you may even limit it up to 90 or even 70.
I'll tell you an interesting story. I'm hearing guys say that
the more the hand sanitizers and the more the space that we are talking about.
Yeah.
So for me, people should stick with it. The maximum is 100. Do not go beyond 100.
Right. I'm hearing guys say that they're excited somewhat because COVID is providing them a certain cover. So a lot of guys are doing their marriages now. And some even feel that they are getting a little disadvantaged because in EI 64, you simply couldn't have the occasion unless you were going to do as in virtual process, or you and your partner just go to register and go home. So there are people who are excited that all they are entitled to invite It's 100. So it saves a lot of money.
It does.
Do you think this new normal will stay with us for a longer time after COVID?
Well, I think so. And gradually we are beginning to understand. And I think I must make this point that for a marriage ceremony, the requirement of the law is that you, your partner, the marriage officer, or the priest, and two witnesses on both sides. It must be in a public place that people have access to. So even if the law, in the law itself, it does not require the numbers. It's not the numbers which makes your marriage valid. But if you go through all the processes, then you are good to go. In any case, if you have a challenge, you can just go to the courts and follow the processes and register. Because when you go through the court system, there's the publication of the bond for 21 days. And when the notices are placed on the notice board and other places, you are good to go. You may later decide to do your solemnization or the church one maybe at a later date. But you can still comply with the provisions of the law without necessarily having all these around. And people just need to understand that in the law, marriage is very simple. Once you follow the processes, there's no requirement of even a ring. In our laws for marriage, there's no requirement for a ring. So we can really save costs and have meaningful marriages if we understand what marriage is.
Right.
The other things are just superfluous, and which makes it too expensive for a lot of people.
Right. What else do we need to know that we don't know about the ease restrictions, Rosalind? The law says that other bodies, says subject to paragraph so and so, a restaurant may provide seated service in addition to takeout and delivery services. In EI 64, it was only takeout, no seated service. Takeout and delivery, no seated service. Now you can sit. Then it comes to say a chop bar may provide takeout and delivery services only. What's that about? Why can't I go and sit in a chop bar like I'm sitting in a restaurant?
I ask myself the same question. And you know why? It's because my mom actually runs a chop bar.
Oh, okay.
But my understanding is that it's probably because when you look at the chop bar in the sense of chop bar in Ghana, I think they are not very certain that these people would comply with all these requirements, or that even some of the setups, it may be difficult to have them, you know, provide all the things that are needed. Because there are some places that are in some corners. That's exactly. But it is important to note that the chop bars are only required now, even though it says may, it ends with delivery, takeout and delivery services only, which means that it is telling you that is all you can do. So
I can go into a restaurant and sit.
Right.
And the restaurant can also accommodate as many as how many people?
100.
100.
Yes.
But in a chop bar, I cannot sit.
You cannot sit in a chop bar. So if you want your fufu and your palm nut soup, then you have to carry your bowl.
Right. It progresses to say that the provision that says that they can do, restaurants can do seated service and takeout and delivery, does not apply to the following gatherings. I don't think that's what I'm referring to.
It's making their
conferences, workshops, wedding, private funeral burials, political activities, individual and training, and non-contact sports. What's it saying about that?
That's with regards to the 64 EI 64 restrictions. It's saying, and it's been set out generally in paragraph 11A of EI 134.
Right.
So what it is saying is that those restrictions do not apply to these ones, conferences. So now you can have conferences, but we know the limit on the number.
Right.
We know the distance that you have to set. We know you have to make sure there is water and all of that. Workshops, weddings, private burials, political activities, individual training, and non-contact sports, because you see that in the previous EI, it had to do with sporting events. And so my understanding is that anything that has to do with contact, then they are trying to prevent you from doing that. But you are allowed to, you know, go and do your own personal training, if I should say it that way. So that's basically what they are saying there.
Okay. Andrew, what would you say one has to pay attention to so that they don't get caught and have to face the possibility of having their institution shut down, or as it were, being made to pay between 12,000 and 60,000, or going to jail for 4 to 10 years?
One of the things I can say is that the various hotels and institutions or conference facilities or public gatherings places should include in their contracts. There should be provisions in their contract that these people who are going to do these conferences will strictly stick by the social distancing protocols and all other protocols to take away some liability from them. The reason being that if you do not include it and you don't make it express and just is oral, you do not put much seriousness to it, because in the law as it stands, EI 134, it says that you must keep a register of all the people who are in the conference, and all of them must have nose masks.
All right.
But the interesting thing about this is that there's no provision in the EI that the people who work in the hotel or the facility who come to serve those in the workshop, there should be a record of them, so that if 5 hotel staff come to serve you, you should write the names of the person who came to serve you, so that if you later identify that those hotel persons came into the room later, if there's an issue, then you can do the proper contact tracing. But we shouldn't just assume that those in the hotel can be easily identified. Specific persons who came to serve you, their names should be there. When they entered, when they left, probably the tables they have been designated, you should know it, so that people to know which people they serve. And even those clean the hotel, somebody is lodging a hotel for a program, the specific cleaner who comes to clean, we should have a record of which cleaner came into which room at what particular point in time. It is also important for us to understand that all these measures, we have a responsibility. Each person has a responsibility. So you as an organizer of an event, you have a responsibility. The driver who comes there has a responsibility. Security, even the staff of the hotels and other conference centers should be able to alert officers that, look, the protocols are not being observed, and draw the attention of the people. And if you find any organization which will not comply with the provisions, then you are at liberty at that point.
Okay, so Andrew and Rosalind, I'm going to read 2 questions to you, and then on the basis of those questions, let's see how we can address the concerns brought in here. And Chibwe Siako is asking, if an individual student, unsure of the level of safety measures put in place by their educational institution and fearful of possibly contracting the virus, should they go back to school, fail to report to school, and the school also fails to provide alternative means of instruction and taking exams, leading to the student unable to take the final exams? What would be the potential legal ramifications? Then a question that also seems to be connected is from Nuruddin. He says, there are several questions about the decision to open schools and the policies in place to protect the stakeholders. A question that is still of concern to many is that of parents who want to know what happens to final year students in strictly day SHS like Accra High, etc. We have been told that all day students should be made boarders according to the policy. However, nothing has been said about strictly day schools, both government and private. Don't they need some arrangement by the government to protect them? Can somebody assist with government policy or any safety net arrangement for the Ghanaian students? So I start with you, Andrew. Okay, so Andrew's line is gone off. Of the 2 issues that they brought up, what would you say?
Well, Just for the last one, please just remember.
Yes, Nuruddin, yeah.
Nuruddin.
It's talking about the body students should be day.
Yes, those are, to my mind, that is something that the Education Ministry will have to take up, because I cannot purport to, you know, answer that question here right now strictly for him. But maybe he would have to approach the ministry and find out what the ramifications are if he is unable to go to school, because he's supposed to be made a boarder and nothing has been done about it. So because of that, he's unsure whether he should attend or not.
Right.
Regarding the one who is uncertain about going to school because he fears for his life, that is what I have said, and I still maintain that position. But if you are not sure, it says that final year students in these particular sections may return by this date. If for any
is the school that is said may open or may not open?
Yes,
may
so
open.
If the school opens and you are still not very sure, I think you should just approach your school, find a way to have a dialogue with them and see, you know, the way forward, because I don't know how I'm going to tell you exactly what the ramifications will be. Obviously, you might miss the exams.
Right.
So if you are willing to let go of that, then that's fine.
Right, but we know that in the universities, some are still keeping to their virtual process, where they are still doing the virtual learning to complete the process and even take the exams virtually. They don't have to be physically present. Andrew, you're back. What will be your last comment, looking at the two issues that have been brought up that I read, the questions?
Yes.
Okay, we still have some difficulty with Andrew's line.
Well, I think that people should do all encompassing. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes. So people should understand that we cannot have everything all encompassing. For example, if you look at
all right, so it doesn't look too good on Andrew's line. But so takeaway. Now we know that by EI 64 there were a lot of things that we're not allowed to do. Now we're being allowed to do them. Conferences, weddings, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
What are the things that appear to still remain that we should do, that if we don't do, we are in trouble, even under the East restrictions?
So for me, basically, it just has to do with the protocols. You are either observing them or you are not. And, you know, if you are someone who is unafraid of the law, then you should be prepared for all the ramifications.
Unafraid of the law?
Yes, a conscientious objector, is that what we call them?
Okay.
You must make sure that if you are going to undertake any type of gathering, you follow what the law says you should do.
Right.
If you are very sure that come what may, you are not scared, you can still go ahead and do, then fine, but just be wary that these are the ramifications that will follow. So everything that we have to do in terms of gathering, in terms of, you know, groupings of people, the law is emphatic on the fact that we have to ensure that there is social distancing. We have to ensure that we follow enhanced hygiene protocols. So we need to make sure that we follow all these things just to help ourselves as well.
All right. Andrew, one of the key things I see in the new EI is wearing of masks by all patrons and staff of institutions, facility, establishment, and so on and so forth. It does mean that we must just make sure we are wearing the mask.
Yes, that's correct. You must make sure you are wearing the mask and you are wearing the mask well. That's the most important thing. A lot of people do not know that they have to wear the mask and wear the mask. But I think we must make the point that it's not just about wearing the mask. wearing the mask well and not just having it on you to show that you have the mask.
Right.
Because if you wear the mask and you don't wear it well, then you are just defeating the aim.
Right. I'm going to try to demonstrate that now, but let's give us your final words in some 30 seconds about what everybody else should be doing and looking out for.
Well, I want to encourage all of us to abide by the regulations that we have in the EI. In fact, you should be guided by common sense in whatever you do. So that's the principle. Be guided by common sense. And presume or assume that everybody around you is a potential COVID-19 person. You must take precaution at home, at work, and everywhere you find yourself.
All right.
If you see somebody not complying, tell the person to
comply, because your life is also in danger. Thank you very much, Andrews Doji Adugu is a state attorney at the Attorney General's Department in the Volta region. I just demonstrated to you how to wear the mask. You always hold here, and when you're removing it, the same. But first, make sure you sanitize. After sanitizing nicely, you pick it up. If you're using these kind of masks, there is a certain metal right here at your nose. You press on it so that it fits into your nose. Rosalind, in some 30 seconds, we are up. Very well.
All I would say is that, and I would end seriously on the religious bodies. The times are changing, and we must also endeavor to move along with the times. There was an encounter in the Bible of when Jesus met the Samaritan woman, and he told the Samaritan woman that the time is coming and the time is now when we would have to worship Christ in spirit and in truth. So with how the world is changing, we just need to be dynamic. We have all sorts of apps that can help us to promote our church services. Let's try and just follow them and ensure that we observe the rules.
Thank you so very much, Mrs. Rosalind Kalaji, A Partners at Law, Andrew Doji Adugu, State Attorney, Attorney General's Department in the Volta region. As always, it's been me, your host, Samson Ladi Anyanini. This has been Covered in the Law, your legal light and help law in these trying times. Join us again, same time next week.